This tutorial takes a look at tax computations in Xspouse. Since child and spousal support are based on the computed net incomes of the two litigants, and the computation of net incomes is based mostly on the tax computations, it is important to have a sound familiarity of tax computations within Xspouse. This can be particularly useful when trying to reconcile differences in numbers between the attorneys for the litigants. In such situations, it is usually easier to pinpoint the reason for such differences by looking at the tax forms and tax summaries, rather than at the data input. Over the course of this tutorial, we will look at all the various areas of Xspouse that can have an effect on tax computations, as well as looking at where in Xspouse we can see the outputs of the tax computations. However, before we commence, it is useful to first point out something in relation to the items under the Taxes menu that can stymie unfamiliar users of Xspouse. If we click on the Taxes menu, you will see various menu items. The thing to point out is that some of these menu items will not do anything unless you first position the highlight on any one of the input fields, on the left side of the screen, in the data input column for the litigant for whom you want to access the menu item. The reason is that these menu items apply to only one or the other of the two litigants, and so one of the litigants must have the focus before clicking on the menu item. Let's demonstrate what we mean by that. The highlight is currently on the wages and salary input field for the father, which means the father has the focus. If we click on the Taxes menu, and then click on Tax Settings, the Tax Settings window will open for the father. Let's close the Tax Settings window, and then move the highlight to the mother by clicking on any one of the input fields for the mother. This time, since the mother now has the focus, when we click on the Taxes menu, and then click on Tax Settings, the Tax Setting window will open for the mother. However, if we move the highlight away from both litigants, for example, if we click onto the Year field at the top of the screen, and then click on the Taxes menu, and then Tax Settings, nothing happens this time because neither of the litigants has the current focus. The same behavior applies to some of the other items under the Taxes menu, and also to the Tax Set button on the toolbar. Okay, with that clarification out of the way, let's begin exploring tax computations within Xspouse. We'll start by taking a brief tour of all the inputs that affect tax computations. Firstly, all the data values from the data input fields on the left of the main screen are assigned to the relevant federal and state tax forms. That includes any values that we enter into any of the top-level input fields on the main screen, as well as any values that we enter into any input fields in data detail sub-windows, such as for example, the Other Taxable Income Detail window. Setting the correct filing status of each of the litigants is of course critical. We can cycle through the available filing statuses by either repeatedly right-clicking on the filing status, or by using the spacebar and backspace key to cycle forwards or backwards through the available statuses. Entering the dates of birth for children is important for potentially qualifying for the various federal and state age-based tax credits for children. In addition to the various data inputs, there are quite a few settings in Xspouse that affect tax computations. Let's look at those. Under Taxes on the top menu, there are a number of items that open sub-windows in which we can set various parameters that affect tax calculations. As mentioned earlier, to access these sub-windows, we need to first position the highlight on one of the data fields in the column for the litigant for whom we want to set the parameters. For example, let's click on an input field in the father's column of data input fields. And then let's have a look at each of the settings sub-windows under the Taxes menu. The first one is Tax Settings. Right-clicking on these fields will toggle the value between include and exclude. Alternatively, you can highlight the field and then use the spacebar to toggle the value. However, in this particular window, the include-exclude fields also allow a numeric value between 0 and 10 to be entered. The tax for that field will be multiplied by the numeric value. For example, a numeric value could be used in the state taxes fields to estimate out-of-state taxes. To reset a numeric value back to the include-exclude toggle, simply right-click on the field or highlight the field and press the spacebar. The Party Tax Information window allows us to indicate whether any of the parties or their new spouse is aged over 65 or blind. It also allows us to indicate whether, in the case of married filing separately, the two spouses live together for any part of the year. The tax credit override window allows us to exclude certain credits from the tax computations, if we have a need to do so. The alternative minimum tax window allows us to enter appropriate additional data for the calculation of the alternative minimum tax. Note that, in this window, amounts have to be entered as monthly values, even if we have switched to annual mode on the main screen. The final window under the Taxes menu that affects tax computations is the MFS Deductions window. Xspouse automatically determines whether to itemize deductions, or to use the standard deduction, in order to achieve the best tax outcome. However, IRS regulations state that, if a spouse chooses the filing status married filing separately, then that spouse must itemize deductions if the other spouse itemizes deductions. This window enables us to set the correct deduction method for the spouse in such situations. The remaining items under the Taxes menu are the tax forms and tax tables. We'll come back to look at those shortly. A few settings in the General Settings window can affect tax computations. To open Settings, click on the Settings button on the toolbar at the top of the screen. The settings that can affect tax computations are: including or excluding guideline deductible spousal support, including or excluding spousal support after 2018 in federal calculations, and domestic partnerships. The tax year, which is located at the top center of the main screen, also affects tax computations. Xspouse implements a 3-year range, which we will refer to as the low year, the middle year, and the high year. We can cycle through the tax years by repeatedly right-clicking on the field, or by highlighting the field and then using the spacebar or backspace key. A shortcut for cycling through the tax years is to press the Y key at any time. The low year is based entirely on the published state and federal tax forms for that year, as well as the published figures, such as income thresholds, credits, tax tables, and so on. The middle year uses the low year's tax forms, and a mix of values that are either the published figures for the middle year, or CPI-adjusted low year values for figures that haven't yet been published for the middle year. The high year uses the low year's tax forms, and CPI adjustments to the latest published figures. Let's switch the view on the right side of the main screen to income tax. And let's also enter some data values. As mentioned earlier, all the input data is assigned to the appropriate federal and state tax forms. You will notice that, as soon as we enter data, the income tax view will be immediately updated with a summary of the recomputed tax forms. Now let's cycle through the tax years. You will notice that, as we cycle through the tax years, the income tax view is immediately updated with a summary of the recomputed tax forms for the selected tax year. Also, all the other values that are dependent on the tax calculations, such as the child and spousal support in the middle panels, are also immediately recomputed and updated for the selected tax year. Let's now have a closer look at the outputs of tax computations within Xspouse. The cash flow view includes a line that shows the total taxes for each of the litigants. The next two views, the income tax view and the employment tax view, provide a summary of the computed tax forms. You will also notice that additional sunken fields appear in these views. You can right-click on these sunken fields to toggle between the two litigants, and to toggle between federal and state taxes. Tax forms are accessible via the Tax Forms item under the Taxes menu. It takes a few seconds to initialize the display of the computed tax forms. At the top center of the Tax Forms window, there is a toggle that allows you to switch between federal and state tax forms. Simply right-click on the field to toggle the view. At the top left of the screen you can select the tax year that you want to examine by right-clicking on the field until the desired year appears. At the top right of the screen you can switch between the two litigants by right-clicking on the field, which allows you to view each litigant's tax forms. On the right side of the screen is a list of available tax forms for each of federal and state. So toggling between federal and state will toggle the list of tax forms on the right of the screen. The title of each tax form is displayed above the form. To view a tax form, simply click on the name in the list on the right side of the screen. Forms that span across several pages have navigation arrows at the upper right to allow you to step through the form forwards and backwards. The W4 form is also available under the Taxes menu. There is one remaining area in Xspouse that can have an effect on taxes and support payments. That is annual bonus income and variable bonus income. Both type of bonus income can be entered via the bonus income reports, which are accessible through the reports menu on the top menu bar. We will look at the bonus income reports in a separate video, but we'll take just a quick peek at them now, simply to make you aware of their existence. As is the case with some of the tax settings that we discussed earlier in this video, the bonus income reports apply to one or the other of the two litigants, so, before accessing the reports, we need to first give focus to the target litigant by clicking on any input field in that litigant's data input column. Let's make the father the focus of the reports by clicking onto a field in the father's data input column, and then accessing the reports. Both types of bonus income report will display the effects on tax and support payments. However, as mentioned, we'll take a detailed look at how to make use of these reports in a separate video. We'll finish this video by returning to the Taxes menu, and then clicking on Tax Tables. At the top of the window, there are a number of fields that you can use to view tables for the various federal and state tax types and filing statuses, and for different tax years. Thank you for watching. We are aiming to provide a suite of tutorial videos on various aspects of using Xspouse. If you would like to receive notifications when new tutorial videos are uploaded, please click on subscribe. Also, we are always receptive to receiving suggestions from users for tutorial videos, so if there are any aspects of Xspouse on which you would like us to create a tutorial video, please email your suggestions to support@xspouse.com.